Hey, this is Joe Big House Kenn. Welcome back to Inside the House. In this episode, as we continue to grow our content and bring you, the listeners, the most up-to-date information we can in athletic development and general physical preparation for all those in physical fitness, today's topic is a hot one with high school athletics, parents, coaches, and athletes alike, and it's max effort testing for the high school athlete. Today, you will hear my perspective on that topic, as well as Dr. Eric Cash, head strength and conditioning coach for Dorman High School. Now let's go to the videotape and see my take on max effort testing. All right, so again, first question of the day was, do you believe high school athletes should do max testing? And again, I think this is a very interesting question that I ask myself time after time. Is there a right or wrong answer? I'm not sure. There's some excellent high school strength and conditioning coaches that I think would say absolutely yes. There's others that would say absolutely no. I think I get caught in between depending on the type of coach and the type of program that's being implemented, as well as the type of athletes you have as a whole. In some general recommendations, I would say this: I don't believe any freshman or sophomore needs the test. I don't really care how well of a football or a basketball or a tennis player they are athletically. I just know that from my standpoints and the things that I want to build at that level, there's no need for that age bracket to even be thought about testing. As an athlete comes through my program and the development of long-term athletic development, do I think a quality level athlete in the junior and senior years of high school could test? Probably, but then there's probably going to be some that I don't want to test there either. Remember, testing is specifically for us. I mean, there's no college recruiter that really cares what they lift. They want their numbers just like they want their numbers coming out of college for professional sports. But at the end of the day, if you can play, you're getting a scholarship, and if you can't, you're not. And one of the other things that I want to bring up, because a lot of times this happens at the high school level, is the difference of, well, we don't one rep max, we multiple rep max. Well, don't think that a multiple rep max is safer than a one rep max. I mean, I've said this time and time, it's simple mathematics really and common sense when you look at just the pure numbers. If I ask an athlete to do something one time, regardless of load, that's really just one chance for the risk of injury to occur. If I ask an athlete to do something 5 times in a particular set, that's 5 opportunities for risk of injury to occur, and then add on the loading parameters of a maximal attempt for those loads. So 1 rep at 500 pounds is very simple. It's 1 time or 1 opportunity and 500 pounds of total load on the body if we're talking about the squat. And if you look at it from a standpoint of that same athlete doing a 5 rep max at approximately 85%, well, that's 425 pounds, and that seems lighter than 500. But when you times 425 by 5, do the math. It's approximately, 2250 in pounds. So 1 rep at 500 pounds of load compressed on the spine, axial loading, versus 2250 or somewhere in that range for 5 opportunities. So if you want to do a repetition max test, then just justify, hey, we're doing a 5 rep maximal test, and we're trying to test base level strengths in a 5 RM manner. Just like if you do a 3 rep. The ultimate maximal effort load obviously is a 1 RM. And when you're in a competition setting, primarily you're going to take that athlete till he misses, because then you know it's a pure RM. I don't believe athletes should ever miss in a testing situation, because I want them to leave with the ultimate confidence that they exceeded expectations and they left with a job well done. There's other ways to test and build resiliency and fighting adversity than putting them at harm's way because they just smashed a PR and you want them to do 20 more pounds. Because really, when it's up to that, it's up to you and your numbers and what you want to turn into a coach. Fortunately for me, at the end of my career, especially in the NFL, no one cares about that. They care about getting the athletes prepared to play football. and or basketball and or volleyball at all. So be really aware of when you're asking yourself, what is the testing for? And people say, well, we have to monitor loads and all that. I can tell you this. When I went to college, I was trained by a high-intensity training coach. We would have never tested if it wasn't for the football coach. Their testing was based off of how we accomplished repetitions for each set, and if they felt the quality of the rep was being perfected the way they wanted, and we achieved the reps that they wanted us to achieve on that particular set, which was generally higher, 10, 12, 15, 20, 20 plus, then they would adjust the load. If we didn't get those reps the correct way, then we repeated that load the next week. So there's many ways for a good coach to evaluate the athlete. I know some of the best coaches in high school right now who are, what I would consider professional powerlifters, squatting well over 1,000 pounds, that train their high school athletes and have never tested them and have been very, very successful in one, building the preparedness and building the key metrics that you want for an athlete to succeed in their sport of choice. And no one's ever known or asked him why. And this is in a time when a lot of these football kids in high school go to these, BS combines and are asked to do 185-pound rep test and things like that are irrelevant. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So as far as high school testing, I think it depends on what you truly believe in. What are you really asking the athlete, and why are you testing? Are you testing truly because you want to know how strong the athlete is? Are you testing truly because you want the number and you want a record board and you want to go to conferences and tell how many kids in high school you got doing this or got doing that? So I think from the standpoint of high school testing, it's a discussion that I think you're going to have numerous people agree to disagree on that concept. I've taken the mode that I believe if I had a kid, regardless, male, female, if I had a kid from the mid-8th grade where I was able to take him through the way I believe any athlete should come through a long-term process, whether it's a freshman in college, the way we would develop that program, or an incoming freshman in high school, I believe that at the point in time in the education that we would give these athletes and their parents by the time they were juniors and seniors, that I would be okay with some type of, raising the stakes in external load to see where an athlete may be. Especially if they're a high-level recruited athlete, their skill set and their athleticism is probably going to be exceedingly past the typical standard deviations and the standard norms of that age bracket. I think they deserve that right. So it's some of that will be individual basis based off the high level of skill, and if they can do the same types of skills in the weight room. There's a lot, we've seen it all the time, especially at the college level. How many guys are great lifters and their really skill set for a particular sport is not very good, and vice versa. Kids that really aren't into the weight room, but yet they dominate their sport. So remember what we are, man. We are a supplement to these athletes' abilities. We're doing things to help them be resilient, to be durable. The best ability is durability. The best ability is availability. You want them out there, you want them healthy, but if we can do our job right, the ultimate goal is we want them confident. We want them to know that they're extremely trained well, that we've done things right as a service to them to make sure that we have put their goals and aspirations ahead of ours. A lot of times I think coaches early on, they're chasing this level of success, and they forget the true level of success is measured by what happens to your athletes, not necessarily what happens to you. No one cares in college football if I've got 400-pound benchers on every position group, too deep on the depth chart if I'm going 2-10 every year. I promise you, I've been there. That's not going to make me look good. So at the end of the day, what are you in it for? What are your real goals? My real goal has always been to be a service to the athlete. So that's how I would answer that as far as the high school coach and what you should have not max test high school athletes. Next up, we have an audio conversation that I had with Dr. Eric Cash of Dorman High School with his perspective on max effort testing for the high school athlete. I think there's a lot of ways to answer it. I had my way. But like we talked about earlier in the show, South Carolina as a state and from a high school athletics does have competitive weightlifting, however you want to call them, powerlifting combination of weightlifting, powerlifting competitions that are scored, right? There's team sport. So at some point in time, for a lot of the athletes in the state of South Carolina, they may be asked to go to this competition and perform a 1 repetition max.
Right.
My question is, because I said out loud that I would not 1 rep max test at all a freshman or a sophomore. A junior or a senior, there'd have to be a lot of factors that I would count in. But I know this, watching you from the time you got there to now, knowing that these kids go through Block Zero, know that they enter your summer program into the 9th grade, going in as a Block Zero athlete. How do you prep these guys? Because you got guys deadlifting 600, squatting 550. You've progressed these guys from Block Zero. So for people who think you got to come into high school and start lifting weights and can't get strong, Eric has proven that to be a falsity. So explain to us your decision-making process and what kids go and get the max in those competitions and how you have brought them to a point where their confidence level in themselves allows them to do that, and your confidence is them as a lifter from a technique standpoint.
So, I guess I'm going to talk about just football because with our female athletes or our PES, what we call PES athletes, we do things a little bit differently. But it's all because we get football so much earlier. But the goal, once we got the program set up at the middle schools, the goal was to have our rising freshman athletes do a 5 RM on front squat, trap bar deadlift, and overhead press at the end of the spring. That was the goal. Now that changes based on, if kids can get what they need to get as far as Block Zero or if they don't get it as a group. Because, when you have 50, 60, 70 freshmen, it's hard to say, okay, well, these kids can go here, these kids can go. So we treat everybody as the same. It's a whole group approach. We're either all going to go front squat together or we're not. So at the end of the spring, the goal is to do a 5 RM. In July, we want to go to a 3 RM on front squat, trap bar, and overhead press. So that gives us about 8 weeks in the summer going into July. When we get into October, we get into 5 RM, back squat, straight bar deadlift, and then regular bench press. And then in December, we do a 3 RM on back squat, deadlift, bench press, and a power clean. And then when we go into February, that's when we get into our region meet. So the rising 10th grade year, that's the first time they do a true 1 RM.
So as a sophomore, you're confident in your progressions that you're good with taking a sophomore football player and letting them do a 1 RM at the strength. And at those strength meets, what are they tested in?
Now, with that said, the kids who come the JV kids who cannot meet the minimums based on their weight class, we don't let them come to the region meet. Okay, all varsity kids, whether they can meet the minimum or not, I'm okay with them coming because it's a testing day for us. But the JV kids, so we have JV division and a varsity division. The JV kids who cannot meet the minimums, they don't come to the meet.
Gotcha.
So one, it bogs down to meet. 2, they're not ready to do it. So we, in a more controlled setting, we get their max as opposed to, because, in our room, it's us watching. But when at a region meet or a strength meet, you don't know who's watching.
Right. Oh, yeah. So how would you say, how would you classify the judging? Loosey-goosey or pretty legit?
It varies. Some years it's great. Some years it's not. You just kind of got to go with the flow.
All right. So let me ask you this. do you see this? Is it coaches judging?
Yes. Coaches.
All right, so here would be my issue with that. And this is why I have
we all have, everybody has issues with it, but you just.
but the issue is this: is if we'll just talk about the imperative squat depth issue.
Right.
If you're at Dorman High, and we'll just say you're teaching top of the thigh parallel, not competition depth, but top of the thigh parallel, and then I'm teaching competition powerlifting depth.
Right.
The other guy's teaching Olympic ATG depth,
right.
And then the other guy's teaching quarter squat.
Right.
Well, depending on which one of us is judging, the quarter squat team isn't getting one passed. Your team's not getting any passed if I'm judging, and really the only guy who's got a shot is the ATG coach.
Right.
So that's my question is, I know those meets have there's something about competition. There's a reason why I had my sons compete in powerlifting in high school, and it's not because I wanted them to be powerlifters, is I wanted them to compete in an individualized sport so that they had no fear or were fearlessness. They had no fear with fearlessness when they went into a team sport.
Right.
But I took them to legitimate powerlifting meets.
Right.
Under powerlifting skills.
The majority of what I've seen is that nobody's judging ATG anyway. So
Gotcha.
Throw that out the window. But the thing that we look for, that we kind of stress, is that as long as the judge is consistent at that rack, if you're going to call them high and allow it to pass, then you got to call them all the same.
Right.
Just be consistent. Because
Well, what happens if at another rack they're judging the squat at a different depth?
Well, there are different weight classes, so it doesn't affect anything.
Okay.
So if I'm with you.
If I'm squatting at this rack, it's all the same weight class.
Right. That's right.
If I'm squatting at this weight, it's a different weight class.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So just call your weight class, be consistent with it, and roll with it. Don't compare rack to rack.
See, that's where, to me personally, although there's always skewness, I'm going to date myself, but when I started coaching in high school to at least try to bring some normalcy to depth, I bought a little sensor from Bigger, Faster, Stronger that you drop around the guy's leg with Velcro, and as they squat down, if they hit parallel, it beeped. If they didn't, they didn't. Now sometimes it didn't go off, and leads the problem. But we were trying to find some sense of normalcy. Right. So in those meets, what are the events that are tested?
Squat and bench. We used to do 40, and when the meets first started, it was squat, bench, vertical jump, and 40. Then they changed before I got here, they took out the vertical and put the broad jump in. So it was squat, bench, broad jump, and 40. And then we took the 40 out about 3 years ago because we could never run it because it was always cold or it was raining. So now it's squat, bench, and broad jump. And the reason that was created that way is because they didn't want it to be a true lifting meet. They wanted it to be an athletic event. It was
so no power cleans ever.
No.
I think in Florida they do power cleans.
Now we do have clean meets. Now that I've put on a clean meet a couple of times at Dorman. I've gone to Columbia for a power clean meet. So there are some, but it's not through our association. It's just a power clean meet.
Gotcha. Well, you've heard my perspective and you've heard Dr. Eric Cash's perspective. And we'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below, as the listeners are the most important people we have as we grow our content and try to educate those across the nation and across the world. So please feel free to comment below. We'll answer your questions or comments as fast as possible. And once again, from Big House Power, Joe Big House Kenn and the Big House Power family, thank you for watching.